that there's some pretty good studies that if you have a what is quote unquote normal childhood, and normal being subjective, where you don't have any extreme trauma, where you're relatively in a stable household, that it doesn't matter if your parents teach you the value of this versus that. It's kind of mostly based on DNA. Like you can maybe nudge it, but people will still grow up and be killers if they're killers and psychopaths. And people grow up to be generally good people, um, despite what you do, despite if you take them to Disneyland or not. And if you have trauma, that does really F you up though. But I don't know if anyone can actually escape trauma. Even if you have a perfect childhood, what's traumatic to you, your bar for trauma is just lower, I would assume as well. So I don't know.
I actually have
I don't know.
a point just like that. Well, this is what I've said throughout my life, and I wonder if it rings true to you. Is that everyone has like a range? We're gonna say 0 to 100 of like pain tolerance, right? Um,
Mhm.
Both physical and emotional, existential, right? And when you get above a certain threshold, that's trauma, right? So like you break two of your limbs from falling off a roof, that's trauma. You know what I mean? But if you were beaten your whole life and then you fall off as a 35-year-old carpenter who grew up getting beat all the time and break your arm and your leg, that's not traumatic, right? So like, but the 13-year-old kid who has a normal life, that's traumatic. And I think it
Yeah,
kind of
you're just
plays
like
out,
sorry, you can finish your thought.
yeah, it plays out like across the board, right? So it's like you grow up in foster care, going home to home, not really having much of an identity of like what a home is or what a family is. And you know, your bar for trauma is really high. When you become an adult, you're going to be impacted by your past trauma, but when it comes to new traumas forming, you're actually going to be rather well protected against a trauma that's not related to your childhood trauma.
I think that's I definitely am probably in closer to you in that camp of especially that last point. Like I don't know what can traumatize me now. Like, but it's funny because yeah, you experience something. I am very resistant to trauma, especially when it comes to family shit. Like my mom died, I didn't even really care because I didn't really love her that much, right? I'm not feeling existential like, oh, was I a bad son? Should I have done more? I'm like, maybe I should, as like an adult, maybe I should logically think through. But the point is, like, that didn't traumatize me, right? A lot of these stuff doesn't traumatize me. But if you experience something you haven't experienced before, it's like it resets that trauma meter to like a perfect example it happened to me was and I'm not traumatized by it anymore, but it's still like a little bit like maybe it's 5% or 2% of what it was when it was 100%. But when me and Chelsea moved out into a house together, there was one night a drunk man tried to break into our house. Right? It's like he was just drunk and he was pounding on our door because he thought he lived there, and then he cut the power to our house, and we had to call the cops to get him like out. And he was like trying to bang it on the door. He's like, oh, and we're like, what the fuck is going on? This is a guy aggressively trying with his might, drunk or not, to break into our house. I don't have a gun. I don't have a knife. Or is he going to get in? Like, what's going to happen? And so then I was like, I had a hard time sleeping in that house for like 6 months at least. And I still am like, I need to get a security system at my new house. Um, and that's like something where it's like if you grew up in a household, like in an environment where people broke into your house lots of times, or I know all kinds of stuff, like you wouldn't be traumatized. It would just suck, you know? It'd be like, ah, that fucking sucked. This asshole made my night suck. But it's like that really affected me and Chelsea for a while because it was a whole new experience that we hadn't had any like we were the baby dropping the ice cream cone, right? It's like a baby that spills their ice cream or whatever, that's traumatic because that's the worst thing that's ever happened in their life. A baby getting brain freeze is unimaginable pain. They can't imagine. So it's like we were that for this kind of thing. We had a very low threshold of resistance to it,
Yeah, and I think you
which
nailed
I
it.
think is
It's
interesting.
it's the level of exposure to a certain type of stimuli, right? And when you have no prerequisite for that, then it not only becomes the worst thing you've ever experienced, but it compares to the second worst thing you've ever experienced, right? The wider that gap is, the more traumatic it is. And I think that happens for a
Hmm.
lot of people. So one of the things about growing up difficult or with ACEs or whatever you want to call it, is that it does kind of train you to be able to put up with future similar things, but it does not, like you said, help when it's something that's not at all related to something of your traumas. And vice versa, like because I had a lot of self-worth issues, right, and abandonment issues, I would pick up on things that were not at all related to my self-worth or to someone abandoning me and make the assumption that it was because I was hypersensitive within that domain, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it I still to me this I kind of comes down to nature versus nurture in some aspect. I don't know where I fall on that. I think it's too confusing and too much. I think I once I find some hard science on it, I think there's hard science that supports both sides. I don't know. I don't even want to talk about that. I think it's like a problem that will not be solved, and I don't have anything to add because I'm very easily swayed by people that make what sounds like a reasonable argument. If someone like that's why I'm not right or left politically because they're trained to say something that sounds reasonable, and I'm like, well, that sounds reasonable. And then I hear the other thing. That's why you really I feel like you need to be guided by fundamental uh something deep and true to yourself to really I don't know to really make a good decision. But that one of the first times where I thought Republicans weren't evil in my life, other than my dad, but like as like coming out of I don't know high school and stuff, you know, Washington, we're all just liberal in a lot of ways, but like I was like Republicans are all just douchebags that are fucking, you know, want to be fascists and they hate poor people and gay people, right? Like, I didn't think this is like a true part of myself, but it was kind of like like I would be embarrassed to have said out loud that I'm a Republican, which I'm not, but still, I would have been like embarrassed to have like I don't want anyone to think that it's like calling me gay. I'm not a Republican. Um, but it was Jordan Peterson. He said something on like the Rubin report where it was like the right versus the left is not good versus evil. It's people fighting for different virtues, basically. It's like people putting different virtues as their top priorities, like the virtue of self-reliance versus the virtue of like empathy or something, or whatever, sympathy. You know, it's like it's neither of them are fighting for a bad. They're both fighting for a good, but it's just which good is more important. And that really helped me. Like that one sentence helped me like reshape my whole like worldview into like understanding that everyone wants the good. It's just about how to get there, you know?
Yeah, and I would
And
go
it's
a
like
step
what goods are more
farther
important than other goods.
than Peterson there, and I would say that what you have is like not just a prioritization of values, right? Virtues, etc. But a trade-off, right? So like one
Hmm.
thing that not is always agreed upon is sometimes both sides will overpromise, but the reality is there's limited resources. There's only one way you can have policy run, right? So by picking a policy, you're pruning off every other version of a policy that could cover that area, right? So it's actually like a negative futures game, right? So it has to be really valuable to be worth cutting off all the other routes. And if you don't cut off the other routes, then you get a bunch of loopholes and you get a bunch of like people getting unfair treatment, et cetera, right? That's why you need like really strict guidelines on whatever policy you do go with. But people don't want to accept that there's trade-offs. They want to feel like they can have their cake and eat it too, right? So they're like, no, we can have as many migrants as we want come into the country, and it will not negatively affect our economy or our culture. And it's like, well, no, that actually isn't possible. But what you can decide is whether you value your culture or your economy more or less than your borders and how much, because you can say, we'll let in up to X amount of people a year in, right? To try to make it so that has less damage to those other two areas. You don't have to go 0 to 100, but they act like those are the only two positions on the graph, right? But there's actually an entire
Well,
gradient between.
I agree. So like 100%. Like there's no world where you look at a like even mathematically, you're like, hey, we import 1 million poor people. Our country is now richer. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like it just they're not. I'm sure there's some subset that'll create things and do that, but in general, right, it's more of you know a financial strain on the country as a whole, and they bring their own ideas, their own culture, all that kind of stuff. It's whether or not you think that it's like just like you said, like is helping people in need more American than trying to or you know more what we value than trying to 100% keep our like I'm not an isolationist. I don't necessarily think we shouldn't ever change our culture in any way, but like you also don't want to completely I don't want to have suddenly people voting on if free speech is illegal or not, you know. The fact that I could burn an American flag, I think I'm pretty sure I can legally, that like I'll get shit on, but I don't think it's a federal offense
Uh, I think you can burn it on your private property, but you
on
can't
private
burn it
property.
in
Yeah, yeah, you
public,
don't want to do.
right?
Yeah, so it's like the fact, like I fundamentally one of my for me that's like a line in the sand I never want to see a country cross is that if I can't burn a flag of the country on my own personal property, then that's like for me that's like fucked up. That is a sign of like shit going really wrong. Not because I want to burn the flag, but it's like who the fuck are you to tell that they can't protest in a non-violent, very like offensive way. Like that's fundamentally, Christopher Hitchens says, like free speech is for the people you disagree with. It's not for the people you agree with. That doesn't make any sense. They don't need free speech. It's only for the people that think slavery should be legal again. In a sense, we want them to say that, and then we all ridicule them and call them a piece of shit, and then that idea goes away. Is the idea of it? I'm kind of like, I'm not a free speech absolutist, but I'm as close to that as you probably could get realistically. But I understand like you shouldn't necessarily be able to like hire a hitman. Like it's just words, bro. The whole, like there is a point where it's like, all right, you're specifically causing harm to other people, like with
Yes.
words alone. I think words could be violence in that, in some sense, but not like being an asshole to somebody, like misgendering them or
Yeah. I
protesting or saying, "Oh, Donald Trump sucks Bill Clinton's dick." Like I don't think that's like un-American to say that.
yeah. So that's I have very like founding fathers free speech views, right? So it's like, as long as you're not calling for violence, right? And there's probably like one other prerequisite I'm forgetting, but those are basically the ideas is that free speech exists outside of those very targeted domains. Hate speech is a very icy road to go down where it's like to make hate speech illegal um, is very different than to make it socially unacceptable, right? That's my preference.
Yeah,
So it's like
100%.
just punish people by well, by not buying their stuff and not hiring them when they act in a way that doesn't accord with your values, right? That's kind of my like to go thing. And the problem is when so many people have such corrupt values that they don't care about that, and then they continue to buy from the people who do those things. I understand that that can get a little dicey, but it's much better to me than to go into homes and arrest people for like Facebook posts because I think hate speech laws eventually progress because there's no line in the sand that you can draw because everything at some level can be interpreted as hate speech because it's a subjective measure.
100. Like if someone is insistent and they want to go around everywhere they go and just talk about how getting rid of abolishing slavery was the worst thing that ever happened to America, and all these N words need to go back to their countries or get in the fields. Like if that's what they go around saying this stuff all the time, I do not think they should ever be imprisoned for saying those words. But I'm not against them ending up homeless, unable to get a job, unable to do things. Like, hey, listen, we just don't put up with that. No one wants to be around you because you're worthless, and we don't want to hire you. We don't want to serve you. Um, like I'm kind of, I support people not supporting that person and not helping that person out, but also I don't think they should end up in prison for that alone. That just not fundamentally. One thing I've always been kind of confused on. I had such a hard stance on it when I was younger and didn't think of any nuance. Was like the person that wouldn't bake the
Mm,
gay couple a cake, right?
yeah,
The couple, they wouldn't bake a cake for a gay couple, and I was
a
very
wedding cake
very a wedding cake, yeah.
because
I
that
was
matters a lot
very
more than it just
staunch.
being a regular cake.
In a sense, I actually, I'm not necessarily, it does, but I actually don't think it would change my view either way. But it's more apparent to their views, is the idea. Like I understand that. Um, because I was very much like, we'll just go to a different baker. Let them, that's their business. Let them do what they want to do. It's against their values. They shouldn't have to do that. And I think it's, if you take it to a more extreme, that's where I kind of start to w- question it though. Like, are you allowed to have, let's say they're bigoted, right? Are you allowed to have a bigoted doctor that won't treat your medical issues in a private practice? And
Yes.
then what if like you live in an area where everyone is bigoted?
Hmm.
Like you're in the South and people won't treat black people, right? Like just go to a different doctors. Like no doctors are treating people here. No one is willing to feed this person because no one's willing to go to a restaurant. They won't go to the grocery store, so they're eating out of trash. And it gets like there's a point where I'm like, I think the federal government does need to protect this person, even if maybe the solution would be to get them out of there, right? It's like, hey, we need to get you somewhere else where there are people that will accept you. But that's where it's like the cake thing is, on an individual level. I am like, yeah, just don't go to that baker. It's their right. Don't fucking try to ruin, like, make shit for this asshole. Just why would you want to give him your money anyway? But I feel like if you extrapolate it out to a bigger thing, especially you think of racism and doctors, not being able to get necessary stuff, or then I'm starting to thinking like, all right, well, if it eventually you would have to step in, does it mean that they should step in on the smaller side as well? I don't know. Like I kind of go back and forth on that.
Yeah, and the worst thing is the government will never step in a case where everyone is bigoted, right? Because we've seen
Hmm.
historically when that happens, it's because that's the
Yeah,
public
I'd have a
consensus,
war.
right? And then that's what the people in government who were elected in government, blah blah blah, believe in as well. So it's kind of like a non-starter. I don't think those two things are connected at all, like the individual case and the group case. Um, I agree the group case is a problem, but I think that's more of like a societal systemic issue, right? When they talk about systemic racism, it's like, no, we used to really have systemic racism. Like we don't still have systemic racism. You get what I'm saying? But like we deal with some minor effects of systemic racism. That's 100% true. But the actual like systemic nature of it is over, and that's why we don't have the problems you're talking about, because those problems did exist 100%, where you had black only and white only places, etc. And I think that's one of the reasons why in modern times you have to have the difference between something that has federal funding has to serve everyone, and a private business can choose not to serve someone. So hospitals get federal funding; they always have to serve everyone, no matter what. And then you can have your private practice, but you'll just be less lucrative if you're in a heavily black area and you don't serve black people, etc. But it's really I wasn't sure if it was Madison that said this, but one of the founding fathers said basically that morality should never be something that you try to push legally, right? Because morality is the job of the people, right? Of the culture to develop and to decide what people should or shouldn't do. But legality is for what you will or won't do.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I think it's like maybe a logical fallacy that I fall into, where it's like, all right, on the individual case, this is kind of with the brain exercise, how I'd get into this loop. I'd get into like, all right, in the individual case, that the answer is so clear to me, where it's like, just don't go to that baker, bake your own cake, do something else. Like, this is this individual's right to not serve whoever they don't want to serve for whatever reason they don't want to serve it. They're losing their money. That's their punishment, right? But then you extrapolate it out to like a big meta issue where it's like, all right, black people can't get medical care in the South, or even it's like they can't eat at any restaurants, right? And then grocery stores won't sell them food, so now like they're not able to get something that would be like a human right. So then I'm like, all right, if the government should have to do something about this, then does it trickle down to where they actually should do something about the small thing, even though I don't think they should do something about the small thing? Then I'm like, so I would kind of get into like this loop of like of thought about it, because like on one hand, I think absolutely it should not be, we should not accept a society where people could be so bigoted that they can't have access to certain things that other groups of people have. And on another hand, I don't think any individual should have to do something that is against their own morals, like their worldview, even if it is like, well, I mean, not anything. I'm speaking in broad terms here, but like if someone hates gay people, they shouldn't have to be interact with gay people or support their lifestyle if they don't want to, even if they're the poorer for it.
Yeah, and like another way that they've kind of targeted that in probably not a purpose at all, right? But just with the legal repercussions of how like corporations, etc., work, right? So at a certain size, a business is no longer allowed to discriminate, right? So it's like a
Hmm.
private business that's owned by one person can, and I don't know that I'm not a lawyer or anything. I don't know the exact lines that exist, but I do remember in one of my like Law 101 classes, right, that that if you're food chain that you can't say, oh, we don't want your business, etc., because of any of their individual traits, but you can say that you don't want somebody to come in if they're causing like a negative outcome to your businesses, like loitering or like being a nuisance, etc.
100%. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, that's why I think Citizens United was such a scam, basically, right? Is everyone knows an individual business owner is an individual, and then a corporation is like an entity, right? They become an entity, or they're a conglomeration. But then, like, what I think it's Citizens United. It's like, well, but what is it? But a bunch of individuals coming together to one thing. It's like that's so they could vote and like whatever, put all their stuff. It's like that's so stupid to me fundamentally, because it's like that's like saying one cell of your body. It's like, isn't your body just a bunch of individual cells? Like it's a different thing when it's all together. It's not the same. Plus, I hate the name Citizen United, Patriot Act, fucking, uh, you know, Fucking, oh, you don't want the Feed American Starving Children Act to follow through? What does it do? It lets us get rid of all the Epstein files and pretend they never existed. It's like, well, it's just a goddamn name, you scamming pieces of crap. But yeah, all right. We should jump into the podcast because we could just talk a while. I would like to keep the podcast at max about an hour and a half if we can.
I'm gonna
That way I
try our
still have
best. We're
time.
already 20 minutes in. We did a cold open because you were just monologuing really good, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna capture
Oh, okay, good. Well, then I'm happy because I
that.
thought we hadn't started yet. Okay.
No, I was like, this is too good not to record. So, welcome everybody to the podcast, to the Philosophy.exe podcast. Um, I am your host Josh, and this is my co-host Cameron.
Hello, Josh. Hello, Cameron. Welcome here
And
today.
we look forward to talking about everyday philosophy in an everyday way. Um, And today's first topic that we're going to go off with is something everyone has, nobody likes to admit, and almost no one really understands the ego, right? So, like, not ego as in arrogance, not ego as in bro thinks he's the main character. We mean ego as in the simplest sense, the parts of you that try to protect your identity, even when it's wrong, broken, or outdated. Ego isn't evil, it's not some monster you have to kill, it's a survival mechanism. It learned what kept you safe when you were young, and it uses the same strategies long after they stop working, and that's where problems start. So, ego is why people sabotage good relationships. It's why adults snap at their kids as they swore that they wouldn't. Ego is why people choose being right over being honest, being defensive over being controlled, and being safe over being happy. So
It-
it's the voice in your head that says, if I admit this, I'm weak. So, how do you feel about ego? Do you feel that's a good description for us to be able to start off with?
yeah, I think that sounds good. Two things I want to add on to it, I guess, is like based off when I listen to Dr. K, Healthy Gamer GG, like he defines it a lot as I am statements, like to kind of keep it because he'll simplify stuff for like a broad audience so they can understand. But like he's like, if I die and you biopsy, you're not gonna find a doctor, right? You're not gonna be like I when I say I'm a doctor, is like where is the doctor? Is it behind your lungs? Like it's not a fundamental part of you. That's something that you've built as part of your ego, right? It's almost like it's like an engine that you run your life with, in a lot of ways. So um, I always think of that as interesting. And also ego, I think one of the biggest issues with ego is people, myself included, are blind to its even existence in the first place or aren't aware of how much of what they are is ego driven. To say someone's egotistical is, there are a lot, I think that term is underused. I think most people are egotistical. But I think we just define certain parts of ego with being egotistical, where really it's like everything everyone does is seemingly driven by ego in the first place. Um, and it's not inherently bad, I don't think. Um, but I think awareness is a huge step in the direction of using ego for good and helping craft your. I think you can craft your ego. I think as an adult, you can revisit. As a kid, it just develops, but I think you could revisit it and adjust it and kind of make it powerful. So you don't need to think about it all the time. It'll just do what you want it to do and help you react in a way that you want to react.
Yeah, I
But
love when
sorry,
you say things because you just feel them, right? This is an experience that's been true to you in life, and then it's scientifically backed up, right? So, um, so with that point you just made, I think as an adult, you can kind of change your ego, remodel it to be more advantageous to you and who you want to be, right? And that's called neuroplasticity, right? So that's a really popular pop psychology word right now, but really what it means is that the areas of your brain that are ego dominant, that play a lot of the roles into developing who am I, are still able to be melded well into life. It does become much more difficult after age 25, but it's not impossible. And the ways that people normally do those things is through reflection, um, meditation, uh, different types of rituals, like people who count the beads or whatever on the um, rosemary thing. I'm not Catholic, but nonetheless, there's all of these different methods that people use uh, in sports. People go into like the what do they call that? The
seems like we might have had a little bit of a hiccup. We'll just give it a second here.
All right. Well, I can hear you.
Let
The
me try to open something. All right, are you back?
I'm back.
All right,
So
I don't know if it was me or you. Sorry.
I, I don't know. But in sports, they have when you're in the zone, right? Whatever they call that, I don't remember the exact scientific terminology, but that is like separation from ego, where you just have pure experience, right? The portion of your psychological brain called the observer would be seeing that you're in flow. That's what it's called.
The
And
flow state. Yeah, yeah, the
yeah,
flow
flow
state.
state. So all of those that I listed, I know you missed the other ones, but those are different ways that people get into, um, you know, this ability to step away from the ego. And by stepping back and reflecting and then changing your everyday practices, you very much can mold yourself to be the person you want to be. Religion is a big, and philosophy are two ways that people have used to kind of anchor themselves to changing because it kind of comes with ritual, comes with reflection, comes with these practices you're supposed to do.
It's interesting because I haven't heard that specific idea, but I think that makes a lot of I just haven't connected those two ideas of ego and flow state. I just haven't thought of them in the same sentence. But if like the flow state is the removal of ego in a sense, like it dissolves in a state of hyper focus, the ego fades away and you're just experiencing what you're experiencing in that moment. Um, I think everyone desires the flow state too, because I think most people have experienced it, and it's going to be silly, right? But like I could think of one of the most clear times I've ever experienced it was playing like Guitar Hero, like just playing Guitar Hero on the buttons, and it's like I'm bad, I can't hit it, and then like I go to sleep, whatever, I come back the next day, and it's like I'm so like everything in the world zones out. All I am here is playing this guitar, this song, and I'm like 5 times better than I've ever been before, ever, and it's because there's nothing else that is like I'm not thinking about even the buddy next to me also playing the song. It's like I'm just in the zone. Um, and I think everyone wants to be able to harness that. So the idea of that actually being a dissolving of ego is just not something I've thought of, which is a it makes me want to meditate more. I'll tell you that. Being able to harness that for the power of good instead of just like happening sometimes randomly when you get lucky.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that adrenaline junkies kind of chase that because doing very high risk activities pushes your, you know, evolutionary biology to use more resources because it's scared of dying, right? Which kind of
Hmm.
pushes you closer to being in that flow state. So it's easier than normal, but mastery of any practice can lead to of the flow state. Like you said, and some of us just get it for no reason. We didn't plan on having it, right? You have it, and then you can't necessarily get it back that easy either. I think it's super interesting that you can either be doing something at a super mastered level where like your mind clears, or you can study the practice of nothingness, right? Meditation, etc., breathing exercises, and both lead to the same place, right? So there's more than one path, but I do think it's interesting that you do have the ability to kind of step away and just use that observer function, which is just the, is versus the I am.
Hmm.
And some people have a stronger ego than others. And I was wondering if you knew that, and if now that you do know that, if that changes, or if you have examples of like, oh yeah, I think that's true because I've seen some people struggle more with, their identity and being able to be separate from their identity or do something that is in opposition of what their identity would need them to do.
I yeah, the idea of people having different strengths of their ego just makes sense to me of a baseline. I'd be let's just say I would be surprised if you had said everyone has the exact same strength of ego, it's just whether or not they've identified it. That would surprise me more. So I think understanding and I'm trying to think about like my own ego. It's a maybe that's a fruitless task to think about your own ego is maybe a little too self aware, but I think I have a pretty weak ego. But I think everyone wants a weak ego, so who knows? But though, if I try to self diagnose my own ego, I think my ego is very weak and whatever, like very easy to move in some ways, and in some ways it's probably I'm blind to exactly how rigid it is and impossible to penetrate in some other ways. So like I'm visualizing in my head ego as like a shell around me as a person, like this is like my protective armor or whatever around it, but I'm thinking of like some areas of it have holes in it, or maybe a lot of it is have holes in it, but other areas of it are like triple thick, probably with steel plating. And I may be a little bit blind to that kind of thing. But the idea, so if someone has a stronger ego or a weaker ego, I wonder if that's more of a they're just have more of their ego is hardened by shells, and everyone kind of has a mix of things they're easy to convince of and kind of move around on, or if it really is like something at your core underneath it that is strengthening the whole thing as a whole.
So, in a lot of the research that's been done in narrative psychology, they found that ego is very tightly related to narrative expression of self, right? Which makes sense because that's kind of how we explained it. But the reason that we're able to explain it in such simple terms now is because of the work that narrative psychology has done. So, if you were to tell a story about yourself and who you are, um, you would not say who you are accurately most of the time. Like most of us would never do that. We would say who we want other people to see ourselves as because that's our narrative version of ourselves, right? That is more of the ego than who we truly are. So like I would say I'm honest, I'm hardworking, all of these kind of things, right? But then I could definitely pick myself apart and be like, well, I'm honest, but I've lied in this situation, this situation, this situation. You know what I mean? Like if I took accounts of who I am compared to who my ego is, it doesn't line up perfectly. Um, and the ability to have those two things match up closer would be a weaker ego because your ego is less of a story mechanism and less unrelated to who you are as a person. But then, even if your ego matches up 100%, it's still your ego, and you're still going to have your blind spots because I act exactly as I want to. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm acting as, the person that I view myself as, not just an experiencer who has no name, no identity, no nothing.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense to me. It just in general of a kind of explaining it. Like if I think again, think about my ego, I'm like I think of me as an easygoing, kind of laid back guy. And I think that's true, but I also like there's a part of me that I would not think I'm someone that likes to cause suffering in the world, right? I don't genuinely want to cause anyone else suffering in any situation, except in online video games, I genuinely relish the idea of causing suffering to other people. And World of Warcraft, like ganking someone that wasn't expecting it and killing them. And Arc Raiders, me and my buddy will like, hey, friendly, friendly, friendly. All right, thanks. Bam, just blow them up. But they're like, you guys are assholes. Like, I really really enjoy that a lot. So like, I don't know what that is, but that's something that I don't like causing suffering in people. But in a fantasy setting, I do like causing suffering. So is that like how much of that is like actually a core part of me, but I've like modernized it where it's like, oh, I can release this cause of suffering on people in this situation, and it doesn't actually cause any real harm, or not. Or, it's much less. It's like 98.9% less harm. So I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting to think about your own ego because I feel like that's kind of I don't know. It's like just looking at yourself. It's like, oh, what does the brain think about the brain in a lot of ways. So ego is not something I've thought a lot about in my life, really. Just in general, other than like, oh, this guy's egotistical when he's like really full of himself, right? Someone that's really successful, and they're like, I talk about myself a lot. He's very narcissistic, egotistical. That's the same word, like in a lot of ways, and not maybe not actually, but I feel like you can use them to describe the same style of person. So, um,
Yes,
it's kind of yeah. It'll be interesting to hear what you think about ego in
and
more
and
because
those
I haven't really thought
people
about it.
definitely have stronger egos, right? And they
Hmm.
might have a lot thicker shell than you or me have. You know what I mean? Just because being rich and successful is so important to them, that's why they have to project that outwards, right? Because of the level of importance it has in their life. We have things that we project outwards about us that we think are important, but that might be something closer to like humility or being good at video games or you know what I mean, being a good father.
Yeah,
Things that aren't as negatively viewed by other people, but still things that we project into the world because that's who we believe we are. You know what I mean? And the more that you reflect, and it doesn't have to be purposely through the lens of ego, you know what I mean? But people who do tend to think about their actions in this kind of like meta way, and I think, well, I'd like to think a lot of people do, you know what I mean? Like when it gets quiet. But the problem is we don't have a lot of quiet anymore, and the more noisy it is and the more stimulated you are, the less you're going to think about everything. But those nights when you lay in bed and you can't sleep because you keep on replaying the things in your head, That's your brain trying to kind of like deconstruct things into a story that it can make sense of that doesn't break who you think you are with who you are. You know what I mean? So it's very important to reflect so that you yourself can agree on who you are.
If I had one superpower, if I was able to be an authoritarian dictator over my girlfriend's life and make her do any one thing, it would be to be able to put her phone down before bed like a little bit sooner. She she's just on like the TikToks and the scrolling stuff. I mean it's not like I'm quiet about it. I'm like you should just like be it's if there's like no sound, no nothing on, she'll want to turn something on. There's a break in the conversation, she'll like open her phone. I'm like, it's okay, just sit in quiet. Just be with yourself for a minute. And she does not want that it at all. And I know that that's like, you probably need to go to therapy. You probably need to work on this because there's stuff in there that you're really afraid of, and your brain is not getting the time to actually work through it that it needs to. And like, this is something that I've been very good at. Like, when I commute to work, I don't need music on, right? I don't need to listen to a podcast, especially when I had an hour long drive. Sometimes I would just sit and I would just kind of be with myself. I could be with myself before bed. So like I always try to I don't meditate ever, but I always try to take some time of silence to just sit for like maybe a few minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. Maybe I'm using the restroom without my phone, something as simple as that. Just to like think about not the video game I'm playing, but to think about myself in a sense like, so what's going on? How are you feeling? Yeah, I'm having a pretty good day. I'm kind of hungry. I wish I had some bad food for me. Yeah, but I probably shouldn't. It's fine. Save the money, be a little healthier. Like I think that really just helps happiness in general. Um, and I'm sure it's more deep than just oh, that makes you happy, but like because it actually lets you go through the process that your body needs to do. But point is, I really wish I could instill that into other people a bit more. But I don't have power over my girlfriend. All I could do is make fun of her.
No,
But you're
and
ruining your life.
I think you're bringing up something that's a very deep-seated new issue that because we didn't have as much stimulation throughout all of our evolution, all of our time, etc., that people don't even realize they're doing because it's not entirely their fault. The dopaminergic games that all of these apps are playing with our brain, like our monkey brains are just not made to be able to compete with that. So if you happen to be somebody who has, a larger weakness to that than someone else, then you're going to get sucked in for sure. So I like to think personally, well, I don't, I honestly think that I just have less of I have more resistance towards that, just because my brain doesn't get as much dopamine as other people do. I don't think it's because I am a stronger person or that I make better choices. I think it's literally just a either biological or something from my development and my upbringing. I had a lot of alone time as a kid. We didn't have cable. I had like five VHSs. I didn't have any video games or anything. I had a handful of toys. My normal thing was like drawing pictures really poorly, cutting them out, and then pretending that they were characters in like a fight or a movie or something.
That's like I think if I was 10 years younger, I would struggle with it a lot more, which is kind of like I feel like I'm lucky. I still struggle with like of course I'm still putting too much dopamine shit into my face because like I'm human and I like spending my time doing things that I consider fun. And I'll waste time scrolling on YouTube short. You fucking short form content is the goddamn devil, bro. That shit is evil. I feel it. I'm like, I don't want to watch any YouTube shorts today. It won't be 45 seconds until I'll accidentally realize that I've done it. Like I'm actually on a short or something. Like, or I'll scroll. I'm like, what? Whoa. Like you have to snap out of it. That I'm very susceptible to that, but I'm aware enough still. I feel so bad for children or people that are younger that didn't grow up in a pre that existing world. Like you, when I was a kid, I mean, I had video games, but I didn't always have new video games, and I didn't always like. Sometimes I couldn't play. I would grab all the pennies I could find in the house, all the pennies, which are now, if, in case you're watching this in the future, that's a thing that used to be 1 cent. Um, and then I would have an RTS battle. I would have like it'd be penny wars is what I called it. I'd have like 50 pennies on this side and 30 pennies on this side, and they'd be outnumbered, and the pennies would kill the pennies. And they're like, we're losing, and then a quarter would come in and just rah! And just like kill like half the pennies. I'm like, I would do like, yeah, he kills 25 pennies before he dies, you know? So like this is the kind of thing that I would do like as a kid. I would sit on my floor and play Penny Wars. And like things like that, or like play with like little army men and stuff. Like you just were alone and you would have to use your brain to come up with the content. Um, and now it's like that's never needed ever. And luckily, kids naturally have imaginations and they can make a paper towel into a fun magic blanket in their mind or whatever. But it does get kind of killed by like the cocoa melons and the stuff where it's like even young, you don't need to think for yourself or think of your own, use your own imagination. Everything is like real, especially with AI. You can make anything now. So that's I don't know. That's too much of an aside, but like I am very grateful to not be a kid today. I'll tell you that.
No, you're absolutely right. And we are in the last generation that had any no screen time, right? Because it's like post 2000, it's not very long before you have iPods and then iPhones in like '09, and then all of a sudden everybody has a screen in front of them forever. And that's horrible for development. We've already seen like different countries talking about what ages, you should restrict screen device usage and stuff at, or just particularly social media, etc. But I really think all devices, because psychology has kind of shown that there's two modes to like human development, and it's either you get bored and you create an internal world, and then you use the external world to mirror to your internal world, right? So you're kind of like pairing these ends together, or you have no boredom, so you don't have the interior world, and the exterior frames all of your world. So as you see, you're not complicit in this game. It just latches onto you, and that makes it harder for you to have neuroplasticity, etc., because you don't really have the idea of what you would make if you just thought about it. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying children make up 100% original ideas, but just taking concepts that are away from each other and combining them into new ideas to you is a very important methodology to learn, because you're going to carry that through you throughout life. Whenever you get two conflicting opinions, the way that you deal with those is really through that same kind of like method of, well, what do I know about life already? Which one of these two things points to that being true or false, and then which one lines up with my core beliefs? And that's how people try to resolve conflict. But in a case where you just have an ideology kind of like wrapped around you, you just always pick the person on your side.
It's I think Jordan Peterson said something. I swear I don't quote him all the time. I just don't know that many philosophers. But it's like, well, I mean, he kind of opened my eyes as an adult that doesn't have kids, that like how beautiful children's minds are. Like, and I've started to experience it, especially working at an elementary school now, and like my girlfriend worked at a daycare. But like, are they the most logical creatures? Of course not. But because they're not tied down by logic, they'll just ask things that we would never even consider because we have so much structure in our brains. It's not really scaffolding anymore. There's a whole building there now, you know? And so like, but they where we have like this constructed way of thinking, they could think so far out the box that it doesn't even make any sense to us. And maybe it doesn't make any sense, but it's like that act of being able to be like, I'm like, oh, I got to put this up here. It's like, well, why doesn't it have wings and fly up there? It's like, well, because we're like, well, duh, that is because they don't have wings. But like, they'll actually sometimes get to a really creative core idea that you didn't even consider. But also like when he's talked about walking around town with a kid, and it's like everything is new, right? They see a house. They see the house. I don't see things when I walk, like when I drive past the McDonald's, I don't see the McDonald's. I know what McDonald's looks like, right? But they're like, well, that McDonald's had a blue thing on its thing. It's like everything is like new, this experience. And it's like I think that you could really learn a lot by just spending time with children in a way that you can't be taught by someone wise. Like you need to be taught by someone with almost an untethered imagination that hasn't been killed off. Because we have an imagination too, but our imagination is still like every alien of every sci-fi movie is kind of humanoid, right? It's like our imaginations are still structured, right? Like you go to Star Wars, almost all the aliens are kind of people like, yeah, they have different faces and stuff, but they have two legs, or maybe, they're all made of DNA, kind of thing. So I think I think people should spend more times with kids in a responsible way. I don't know how you spend more times with kids if you don't have any, but I think that they really can teach you lessons that you can't learn through a book in a lot of ways. Maybe you can, but like I think it's a lot easier to just not disregard everything a child says and kind of understand what they're thinking as well. But sometimes, yeah, that why is the dog brown? It's like I don't know, the dog's brown. Like
Yes,
not everything they say is
there's
intelligent.
more stupid ideas than transcendent ones, but the transcendent ones couldn't exist without the opportunity for the dumb ones. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. So, and I honestly think that you were right the first time. I don't think you can learn this from a book. I think there's a difference between understanding and embodiment, and sometimes for embodiment, you just have to experience something, right? You know what I mean? Now you can learn math by understanding it, or you can take a bunch of apples and then do the math with the apples, right? That's what we did in like kindergarten. They were like they
Hmm.
had the little paper apples and they're like, we have three apples over here, if we take two away, you know what I mean? You get to a point where you can kind of synthesize those more mechanical pieces, but when we talk about like something that has to be deeply core to living, I think a lot of the times experiencing it is the only way to like have the deeper understanding rather than just reading child psychology by like I want to say, no, I'm gonna mess up the last name. Starts with a P. Really good child psychologist though. Yeah, good point.
You thinking of the name?
I didn't see. No, I didn't think you were gonna lead us down this way. So I'm very happy you did. I have children, obviously. Uh, if people think I'm smart. I don't know why, but the important thing is when I was a kid, I was not very smart and I was very creative. And I think almost all kids are creative, and I think our creativity gets like pruned off as we become an adult. It's hard to find creative adults. And I remember in sixth grade science, I asked my teacher, and I had thought about this the night before, and I was feeling really good about it. He had told us about time zones, how they work around a globe, and how there's like 24 of them that go around the globe. And I was like, okay, I remember hearing Einstein say something about if you go faster than the speed of light, you go back in time, right? And I was like, nobody's ever thought of getting in a hot air balloon and then going the opposite way of the time zones. You'll go back in time.
Hmm.
Well, obviously,
I
that's not how it works.
it's not out, but I didn't. I remember not understanding why it didn't work. I'm like, but if there's 24 time zones and you travel it in under 24 hours going backwards, how come you're not going back in time? It's because there's an international date line. Like that's like, hey, this like resets it or whatever. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, but that was like, but if you go back 24 hours and 23 hours, how do you not gain an hour? Like I remember very clearly thinking a thought like that when I was younger too. Um, and to this day, I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm like, what the hell's going on over there? That's where they keep. That's damn you. It's damn you, international dateline keeping us death alive. That's the government just making sure we all die one day. Right? They can't let us solve immortality.
But I think there's a bunch of those kind of ideas that all of us had when we were a kid. We just don't necessarily hold on to them because they weren't especially memorable. And a lot of the times, the adults just brush it off. You know what I mean? I'm lucky that I had a teacher who was willing to talk with me through why that didn't work and explain the the international dateline and stuff. And the whole time I was very kerfuddled because I thought I had this this uh, immutable idea, and then of course it turned out that I used a hot air balloon, and it's like a plane would make way more sense, first of all. But like,
Yeah.
you're a kid.
Uh, uh, yeah, kids have dumb ideas. Like you said, more ideas are dumb than transcendent. But the idea, the ability to think where other people already put down, I don't know, pavement, right? It's like for you, the cement's still wet. Like you could think in a direction that people can't think. And that's what's so interesting to me is because we were all that kid, maybe not literally, but most of us were that kid with the ability to think like I think of it as like almost tendrils going out in every direction. But we can kind of see we can see that in children now. We can remember it, we can identify it, we can learn about it, but it's still not us anymore. We can't reclaim it truly in that way because and you could try to build yourself in a way where you are an open free thinker, but there's just like there's so much structure in how you think that I think you're not even aware of. Like, I think it's kind of a concept of free will, right? Like, why'd you think of A and not B? It's like, well, you can't. I didn't. It didn't occur to me what didn't occur to me. If something
Yeah.
doesn't occur to you, and then it doesn't occur to you, so you're not free to think that direction in the first place.
You're absolutely right. And I would actually go a step further and say, um, I brought the wrong charger with my computer, so I'm gonna have to switch my charger in a minute. But I would actually go a step further than that, and I would say, not only were you creative when you were a kid, that you would be as creative as you were as a kid right now, if it was possible.
Okay, can you get it up again,
It's
or
up.
are we? Oh, okay, we're up. We're
I
up.
have no idea like if it recorded in the meantime, but it says the recording's still going, so I'm running with it.
Okay. The last thing I heard you say was shit.
I,
You were telling me about I would be as creative today as I was then.
if it was possible. I like what we've seen in developmental science is basically creativity is unbelievably expensive, like brain wise, right, for resources. And the way that we think is actually kind of similar to like an LLM, only we don't get to choose what we prune off, you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
as you figure out what works, the paths that don't work just kind of get truncated so that you don't go down those paths again, and then that helps you stay within the realm of viable thinking. Now, our realm of viable thinking is still very vast. Don't get me wrong, you know what I mean? And different people's is wider, and those are the people we consider more creative. But that does come at a cost, which is usually that they get tired easier. You know, uses more resources. Some people get overstimulated around other people, etc. So you'll see a lot of like the most brilliant minds, which isn't necessarily correlated to IQ, but when it comes to people who, if you take a sheet of paper and you ask them to write everything that you could do with a brick, they can write like 250 things, and some other people can only write 10 things to do with a brick. You know what I mean? So it's like that difference there, that kind of brilliance and creativity is something that does exist, but it costs something.
That's so that made me think of like seven things that I want to say because like it's so uh, vast. So it's like one is like I like how you tell me something based off research. I'm not asking for the data. I'm trusting you. But it's like, all right, this is what research has found, and I'm like, it's so obvious when you look at it in real life. Like, what do people? What are some of the greatest minds, most creative people, like ever? They're like, especially in music, it's like drugs, right? Like it reinstills those paths that don't make sense. Like it breaks the building in some sense and allows you to think in ways you didn't think of before. And then it's very easy for us, especially like in movies and books and fantasy novels, for us to think, how did someone think of that? You know? And so it's like, of course, there are going to be more creative people and less creative people, but like some of the most creative things that have been awesome have been drug induced or maybe meditative, but it's like things that allow you to alter that structure in a way or temporarily lower it so you get to actually go experience that. But even then, there's like that's what's so beautiful about art. And I'm not as much of like a visual art guy. I mean, like actual like painting on the wall, like I don't get that much out of it. um but like music and especially like movies and stuff, like it allows you a window into a part of creativity that you could not have thought of on your own, right? It allows you to take a part of whatever this crazy thing that they thought of and implemented. Like you get a chance to see that and experience it as if it is your own idea because your brain thinks that thing, which was kind of locked off to it before. That's why twists are so engaging, right? I didn't see that coming because you couldn't see that coming. So that is something that I think is so wonderful about art in general. And I'm sure that like an actual like famous paintings can do that for people as well. I just don't think I'm as sensitive to that. Um, but yeah, I'm great. Oh, also, I was going to say there seems to be a correlation with creativity and unhappiness, if anything, right? It's like you say, when you start chopping off the things that don't work and you become less creative, and you become more structured, you seem to have a higher level of content. But when you're able to really think outside the box in a truly like profound way, it tends to lead to unhappiness, less structure, less being content with life. And it's in a way, why? How could you not? If you're really your area for thinking is so much wider, your potential for what you could want, I feel like, is a lot higher. And there's things that you could think of that you couldn't want. I don't know. It's like to me, this all makes sense. It all lines up. Like why being creative makes you sad, why people doing drugs leads to more creativity, and whatever the other thing I said was that I forgot already. But I
Yeah.
said something else. I said three things. But
And
yeah,
yeah, and like I said, all of those are backed by, at least reasonable studies within these domains. Anything I say, you can just type right into an AI or search engine, depending on what you tend to trust. You know what I mean? And you can kind of see the background on these things. When I can remember a citation, I'll try to do it. But I kept on coming up with Piaget, which is a friend of uh, Jordan Peterson's, which is
mhm,
not the scientist who did child development psychology. So I
yeah,
was like, I'm just
it's a
not
different
going
P.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, different P word, but also French, right? So that's all I can
Okay.
explain is that's a French P word. But yeah, so you said some really cool stuff there. So not only does drugs in general increase creativity by just reducing the noise and opening up those pathways, right? Um, Psychedelics, particularly, create dissociation from ego, right? So that's another
Hmm.
way that you can get to a state, outside of your own ego. Now, a lot of people tend to dissociate. That's why they see the same kind of like faces in those recursive structures. The work that has been done, not that there's a ton because it's kind of like borderline illegal to work with any psychedelics anyway, but the work that has been done is all of these structures that people recreate from memory or that somebody else makes for them, they all follow the same kind of like geodesic signatures, which is basically the idea that um, they're made of the same structure at scale, right? So if you take like a circle and you make everything out of the circles, right? You get what I'm saying? Same
Hmm.
thing with any other shape that you could think of. So that's like a recursive structure. So the the reason that leading science believes that these god-looking creatures or whatever aliens, whatever you want to call them, when you dissociate, the reason that they are recursive is because the brain's internal loops are recursive, and that it seems to be a physical manifestation because your brain basically can't be empty, right? So if you only have your observer portion of your brain on, um, and everything's completely blank, your audio is going to start, not just your audio, sorry, your visual centers is going to start processing like brain loops. And the way it would visually process it would be in some sort of recursive pattern. So it's kind of like how when people go blind, they learn to be able to like hear things that nobody else can hear, etc. When you get too overstimulated, your body will actually shut down certain parts of the sensory. So they actually do these really weird burn studies with people where the pain is so bad when you have to take the wrappings off of a burn victim, and you have to do it like once or twice a day. that with children, they really wanted to find a way to not give them, like, you had to give them hard drugs to stop that. So what they started doing is they gave them basically headphones, blasted some crazy music that hits at all kinds of different like levels, and then have them play a video game at the same time while watching a screen. And they were so sensory overstimulated that they did not notice when the wrappings came off, when normally they would have literally been in tears. So that's kind of showing you how like some sensory areas can shut off while others still run. So that's kind of the idea behind all of those god slash alien people that you might have seen in psychedelic visions.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of it, of that kind of stuff, like in general, right? People call them dark elves or whatever the hell they want to call them. To me, well, first, before I get too far, like regarding the kid thing, I think that like just that makes perfect sense if you just look at, I mean, the body already has a physical, observable way to reduce sensory input by like how much light's in a room, right? Your eyes contract or stuff. So the idea that your brain could change sensory input of other aspects would not at all surprise me. And it seems like, yeah, and plus, I'm sure there's like drugs involved, but everyone can probably remember the monks that set themselves on fire, right? Like literally, they would catch them, and yeah, it's like maybe they're on heroin or ecstasy and whatever kind of drug, but it's like, yeah, but still, like there's a point where it's like, yeah, you really got to be. It's not like they're just probably sitting through the pain. There probably is a huge aspect of sensory, putting it out, but that I think that furthers your point, right? Of just like, yeah, the brain has the ability to be overloaded with senses and it to regulate that kind of stuff, which is very useful in general. But as far as the dark elves and the whatever the angelic things, I don't even know what they're supposed to look like because I just haven't really done a lot of research on it. But as a skeptic, not of that it existing, of that of to me it just sounds kind of one to one with like near death experiences, right? Like everyone that dies or almost dies, they see the the pearly gates and the heaven and the angels, or they see the hellfire. Like they see things that they already kind of, it's probably different in some sense, but like things that they were told their lives, whether or not they believed it, is going to be what their brain processes, right? Because it's like it's not that they're actually seeing what they're seeing, it's that this is what their preconceived no idea of what it would look like is, and that's kind of filtering itself through their I don't know if it's psychosis, but their imagination as they lose their connection to their physical body. And so like when I hear the stories of like, oh, everyone in this room took drugs like psilocybin or something, and they all experience like the same vision, or they're in the same room, and we're trying to map out the real the physical realm of this mental space, I'm not convinced that it's like it's actually a real space, but it is kind of more like what you said, like it's your there's a logical explanation for why your brain would process this stuff in that way,
Yeah, the one additional piece that I would add is the reason it tends to take on a human form is because that is the first thing that the brain ever trains on, right? So there's something,
Yeah.
you should look this up if you don't know what this is, if you're a listener. But there's something called mirror neurons, and basically what they are is we all have them, but you lose them over time. They turn into different other neurons, right? But babies have tons of them, and what they're used for is it allows the baby to internalize and externally express what people holding it do. You get what I'm saying? You smile, it
Hmm.
smiles. You open your eyes, it opens its eyes. You stick your tongue out, it sticks its tongue out. And that mirroring is because the mother child is a dyad. They're actually like one being made of two beings, because they used to be one being made of one being, right? And then you
Hmm.
take it out, and now it's one being made of two beings for like the first 9-ish months or whatever. You know what I mean? And then it's kind of like two separate beings that one takes care of the other. But that's why those first 9 months are so important, is because whoever is holding the baby and taking care of the baby is modeling the behaviors that's going to internalize. And if you don't have true love and empathy and care for that baby, then the baby doesn't know the difference, but its development cycle will know the difference because it will just act differently.
I mean, why would it be different in humans, right? You're too close to a duck or whatever. When a duck is born, the duck thinks you're the mom, right? Like it doesn't notice that it's a duck and you're a human, right? It's like almost all living creatures feels like when it's first born, it's it is got nothing but trust for whatever it sees in front of it first, basically. That is what it will associate with its caregiver and what it'll give its affection and trust to. Because like evolutionary, like how could you survive if a baby didn't trust you? Like, right? It just doesn't even make sense, right? The babies that blindly trust the people that care about it more than anything in the world, of course, had a higher survival rate, right? Um, so yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense to me why it would appear to be human because babies just have all the whatever
Right.
their mirror neurons. That
It's
sounds like a
just
cool Mass Effect thing.
we see faces everywhere. Not literally you and
Hmm.
me, but I'm sure you have before. You look at cloud,
Yeah,
you can see a
clouds
face,
and
right? Even if you don't see a face, you see the body of something that would have a face, right? It's like that's a deer, and you're like, oh yeah, I can see it's a deer from the side, but a
no,
deer
I
would
mean,
still have a face. So
anytime you put three circles too close to each other, someone's going to see a face in it, right? It's like, oh, these are its eyes and this mouth, and it's like, oh,
yep,
it's like you could even if you're not looking for faces. Okay, you could find faces, but let's say you are looking for faces, you can make a face out of almost anything that
that's
becomes
right.
believable in your brain.
Yes.
So, um,
And you remember the
a
Jesus
toilet
toast
seat
from
can
when
look,
we were younger?
yeah,
There was a toast that had like Jesus's face in it, and as soon as they told me it had Jesus's face in it, I saw Jesus's face. I was like, holy shit, yeah, they're right. Like,
yeah, and you might not even notice it initially, but it clicks. It's an optical illusion. I mean, that's what optical illusions do in general, right? They make you see two faces in different ways or whatever, and then it's kind of crazy. Like it could be hard to optical illusions blow my mind. Obviously, that's the whole idea of them, but it's like once you see it, you almost can't unsee it. And sometimes when I see an optical illusion, I have a hard time switching between the two. Like when my brain will see the new thing, it'll be hard for me to see the old thing again for a bit. And then there'll be a point where, I mean, I'm sure this is a great metaphor for like in just human processing in general, but like there will become a point where you've seen that optical illusion enough where you can't unsee both of them always. It's like you can't renew the illusion. Maybe you can after like 5 years, you haven't seen this, your brain can kind of forget it, but like you can't sit there and not see what you see now, which
and
is
what a
crazy.
great metaphor for holding contradiction, right? So it's like sometimes you have these two values that are opposed to each other, and you're only going to be able to see the one that you think is important right now. And then over time, you might change your mind and say, actually, I was wrong. The other value was more important, right? And by the time you get 10 years past the event, you can finally get to the point where like both were valid and I had to make a choice, right? And I think that's how a lot of human development works, like you said. But I just wanted to give a direct corollary.
it kind of maybe it's kind of connected to like my religious beliefs. I was raised religious and I was never truly fundamental like a fundamentalist even as a kid. Like I remember sitting in church when I was 7 years old with my dad, and I remember thinking to myself, like in my head, I was like, I hope no one finds out I don't believe Jesus died for my sins because that sounds ridiculous to me. But I believed in God for sure. Like I was like, yeah, I believe in God and He made the world because how else could all this exist without that? But I don't believe in Jesus Himself. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I didn't do anything to the guy, and if I was there, I probably would have asked him to please stop hurting him. It's like point whatever. Childlike thoughts. But now as an adult, I don't believe in God at all. I would consider myself an atheist. You can call it agnostic. I say I don't know. I just really don't believe. But I have lost the ability to understand how to believe in God in the first place. Like I don't even though it's something it's kind of like the childlike versus now. I used to believe in God and now it just makes so little sense to me that I don't even think I could believe in God again. Um, in general. Like I feel like that part of my brain was snipped off, and it's like I I try to like understand. Like, all right, I know this person believes in God, but it's like I just can't make that connection anymore. Like, but how could you? Even though I was one of those,
Mm-hmm.
like that's a very weird feeling for me, and I can't think about that in a lot of other aspects of my life if I have experienced that. But something that I definitely was a believer of that now I'm so far removed from it, I don't even understand how I was initially, even though it's still the same brain functionally.
Yeah,
It's different because it's changed over time, but it's like it's been the same person. You know.
yeah, and that's a great point. We were talking about ego before, right? And like we all have our
Hmm.
blind spots. So like that's a place where you have a blind spot with your ego is now God not existing is just a logical part of your reality, right? And it's like those are things that you can't take down those walls to kind of pretend. You know what I mean? Because those walls are too firm within your ego and your set narrative reality. Because ego does substantiate outwards, right? So your worldview is an instantiation of your ego, but just of your beliefs of how things are outside your body, etc. And those are the harder things than the interior to change, right?
Yeah, and well, I could say I could pretend a god exists, but what I think a better way of saying it, well, not a better way, but I think like what you mean is like I can't truly entertain the idea in my own head of it, right? Like I could pretend like, oh yeah, I could also pretend I'm in Lord of the Rings, right? But I don't really hear give it truly the time of day, right? And I really I do think that's a blind spot for me, but I don't think it's one that th- that is a part of my ego that I thought of as our conversation. I'm like, this is something that I think might be an unshakable part of my identity. I don't want anything to be an unshakable part of my identity, but I know if I saw a meteor come into the planet, like if I saw a meteor in the sky coming to crash down on Earth and it said Jesus is Lord, ask for forgiveness, I'm way more likely to think aliens are fucking with us than is God. Like I'm just like I'm that far. Like I would still not take that as a sign. I would take that as like I'm really sure there's aliens and that they are really trying to screw with us, right? Like that's pretty far gone and that's pretty rigid in that way of thinking. And I'm not against the metaphorical God or I'm not against other people believing in God, but I think like that is a branch that I think was pruned, and I think pesticide was then sprayed on it or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I think that's like permanently gone. But maybe I could like when I hear someone like Dr. K say he's religious, I don't really I don't understand what that means. Like, but he's also purposely kind of vague. Kind of like I don't think Jordan Peterson's necessarily vague. I think he just speaks in kind of a poetic way in general. Like I think he's pretty consistent in what he says, but it just if whether or not you can interpret it properly. But Dr. K, I think is specifically vague because he doesn't want to lead people down paths. He wants people to travel those paths. Um, but yeah. So that is an interesting thing for me to think about, and I've thought about that a lot. I've thought about like why am I so willing to unbelieve? And it's like I just don't believe. So I don't know. That's a part of me that I don't think like my dad understands how little I believe. I've tried to express it to him like, listen, you've not met a more materialistic person I think ever in your life than you have me. Like that part has been like cut off, and then we burnt the wound shut. So I don't know, but I like to think of myself as an open-minded person in a lot of ways, but that might be my biggest egotistical that and identifying as being funny. If someone tells me I'm not funny, or if I tell a joke that doesn't land, that hurts. Like
Mm-hmm.
I not like bad. Like I can make I get that's not a good joke. But if I'm like with some buddies and I say something, I'm like I think it's funny, and no one responds, I'm like, fuck. My humor detector is off. But sorry, I'll let you comment on
No,
that or continue it.
no, those
But
are
that
really
was
good
something I
points.
definitely thought of.
So, and the the reality is, you identify two things that are core to your identity, and one was an exterior, right? That was a worldview thing, which is the idea that God's not real. And one was interior, which is the idea that you are funny, right? And both are a destabilizing force. If something happened in your life that forced you into the mindset or was evidence that there is a God, you would, like you said, play it off as aliens or something else because your mind just can't. You pruned off that branch. There's no going back. Um, Now, whether or not the branches are repairable, I'm not really sure. You know what I mean? But I definitely agree
Hmm.
with you that the branch is pruned. It's gone. Um, and same with when you don't get the laugh, when you're like, no, I mean, I thought about this was a good joke. I internally felt it. I'm a funny person. For a minute, you question like maybe I'm not a funny person, and then you bring yourself back. You're like, no, of course I am because I'm right. And you, at least 9 out of 10 times they laugh. You know what I mean? But
Hmm.
it actually hurts you on a deep level in both of those cases, and that's a good sign that it's something that's tied to your narrative identity or your ego, whatever you want to call it. We all have it, and when people don't know anything, like they haven't taken the time to think about what are the pieces of me that that exists around. That's how you get people who can see complete 100% evidence of something, and then they still just make up an excuse of why it's not that. You know what I mean? And we all do it, and we all have our thing. There's just people who know what it is and people who don't.
That's so. This is good self reflection right now because, like, I don't think something can happen in the world that would make me feel emotional about my non-belief in God, really. Like I that's something I that's what like you said, that's a worldview thing. I'm like, I just don't think there's a God. I don't think there's anything supernatural, ghosts or anything like that. Not that I'm way more open to the idea of ghosts or stuff. I just don't think there is. Like Bill Nye said, it's like I don't believe in ghosts, but I'd love to meet one. That's kind of like my mentality about that. But like when it comes to the funny thing, I mean, I could remember distinctly telling jokes that didn't land for a long time, and I'll dwell on it and I'll rethink about it, and I'll feel bad for having worded it in a way that I feel like this is a perfect example that just happened like 2 weeks ago. Um, and the fact that I remember this specific, I must have told 1,000 jokes over the weekend where my girlfriend's grandma died and we went to like a family thing and I was out of town. I must have told 1,000 jokes. People generally like me. The only part I really remember is the one time I told a joke where I questioned whether or not they actually found it funny or not. Um, and it made me question a lot of things. This is exactly what happened. Um, so keep in mind, we were already making jokes. It was a feel good. This wasn't just. It's even important for me to like. This is not going to be funny, but I want you to understand that in the context, it was more of a timing thing because we were already having a good time. But she said is she was like, oh, as her joke is like, yeah, part of the ritual, like the grandma wasn't Mormon, but it was we're going to a Mormon church, but so she's like secretly going to make it a Mormon thing, but she's not going to. But this is like all of a joke, right? She's like, so part of the ritual is like we're gonna have you all say that you're agree to be Mormon. Um, and I was like, yeah, I was like, I have no problem agreeing to be Mormon. I don't mind like lying to you or something like that, right? But she did not find it funny. She wasn't like offended, but it kind of just like brushed it off. Like it was like not a joke. And I remember thinking in that moment, I'm like, okay, she didn't laugh at all, which I thought was like it's pretty funny. Like I was thinking of the Richard Dawkins, like of course I'll pray at dinner. Say I'm not offended by saying gibberish, right, or something like that. Like that was kind of like the idea of the joke. But I remember not only feeling like the joke wasn't funny because I still think it's a reasonably funny joke. Like I still am confident in that moment with a lot of people that could have hit well, but as like it made me realize that I misread this person's in a way that I thought that I had read them correctly. Because that's really what humor is most of the time. It's correctly reading a situation. Like you don't make a 9/11 joke at like as a cold open, right? Like it's just like what a fucking weirdo, right? But you absolutely within 5 minutes you can make an offhanded 9/11 joke if you have everything set up properly. I mean that's the whole point of stand-up comedy, right? Is kind of setting up things to be funny that aren't normally funny. So me being like, oh, I misread this situation, I misread this person, I misread all this stuff and I've thought about it a lot in the last 2 weeks. I'm like, where did I get it wrong? Did I undervalue her dedication to her religion in her eyes, or did I say it a little too seriously, a little too nonchalant, a little too with too much conviction? Could I have said that in a way that would have made it funny? But like I don't want to go on and on, but like this is the all say is like religion has never made like believing in God, I don't think has this kind of response that I could elicit from an outsider in this way. Like if I say I don't believe in God and someone makes a really good point or whatever, some sort of counter argument because I make a faux pas, I'm like, yeah, well, I'm just like I said something silly. I don't think that I would have an emotional reaction like I did to that, like a
Yes,
this kind of
exactly.
stuff.
And that's the difference between something being part of your ego versus a worldview, right? And it's part of your worldview, but it's not part of you. The fact that there is
Hmm.
no God, it's just to you a fact. So, and you're indifferent to the fact. You're like, if you want to believe it, whatever. Now, somebody who
Yeah.
believes in God and it's part of their identity, you disagreeing with them is going to deeply hurt them the same way that you not telling the joke. It's the same mechanic, right? So that's why I think
Hmm.
it's such a good exercise for you to go through that story for people to understand like we all go through these moments where we're spending so much time and resources on something so trivial because it's not trivial because that was a representation of your ability not just to be funny and that's connected to your identity but for you to be able to read situations and to read people and if you can't read situations of people that would extrapolate across your entire life that would shatter your ability to do the things you do content creation etc so it actually does matter but it's just one of those like meta patterns where we don't think about the large thing until you reflect like you did, right? We normally just think, oh, I was just being dumb because I think I'm funny.
Yeah, I mean, I even talked to my girlfriend like right after that too. It's like I'm like that was funny, right? I'm like I'm confident enough. Like, I think that joke was funny. And again, funny is subjective, of course. But like, but it's like, hey, we're gonna make you all agree to be Mormon. I'm like, hey, that's fine. I don't mind lying to you. You know, it's like that's like a funny enough joke. I still think in that context, in that situation, it is funny. But what I was, yeah, exactly what I was upset by was my misability to read the situation, and that because there's a lot of jokes I don't make because I think someone it won't reside well with somebody, right? So sometimes you test the waters a little bit and you kind of push the line a little bit, and other times you're like, listen, when I come to Victor, my boss at work, I don't joke about God. It's so fundamental core to like his identity of a person. It's like if I make a joke, he doesn't understand that it's a joke at all, and he'll start telling me about the Bible, right? It's like it's like I've read that about him accurately, right? So those aren't what I make jokes about. Um, so yeah, that was what it was. It was just like I was. This is exactly, I think, what your whole philosophy or what you're writing about has been about. Is like my expectation of the result was not the result that was given back, and that was like a recalculation. I'm like, what happened? Am I did I and that's where I'm trying to find out. Did I miscalculate her? Did I miscalculate the way I presented it? Or was it a combination? Or did she think it was funny and she was just like doing something else? Like what was she like? Yeah,
Hmm.
it's like it's funny, but she was thinking her grandma just died, right? Or sorry, it was her mom just died, and we were gonna go to the funeral like that day or something, right? Was she just like it was like a joke that she would have found funny in a different mindset, but she's
Hmm.
upset that her mom wasn't Mormon and that she is Mormon, and now she thinks she has to go and do after service Mormon care to save her soul and stuff like that. So, like, who knows? But yeah,
Yeah.
like
And
you said, it seems trivial, but that stuff it makes sense to me when you say that is important because that is a core part of your identity that you've miscalculated. So
right.
you have to square that circle, I guess, before you can move past it.
Yeah. Well, because you need to have a consistent sense of self over time. Otherwise, we would have been a million people in our life. And for the most part, most people feel they're pretty consistent throughout their life. They're one person. But if you talk to anybody exterior, they'll be like, "Oh no, you changed a ton over time." You know what I mean? But to you, it felt so gradual that you can be like, "Oh yeah, if I look back 10 years, yeah, sure, I'm different than I was 10 years." But last year, me and last year, like the same person basically, unless you have
Yeah,
a really tragic event or something, really life shaking happens. Your sense of self should be pretty cohesive over time. And the way we're able to do that is by re-rationalizing subconsciously our actions with our identity, right? Or at least our perceived actions. So, like in the example you gave, if I were to guess what was going on, like you said, her mom's not Mormon, she's Mormon. She now feels she has to save her soul, and then your joke is about you not really being Mormon. If anything, that might just make her feel. It just reminds her of the problem she's facing, that her mom actually
yeah.
give would not care in this situation about the ritual that she needs to do.
I think she was probably more upset because we didn't make jokes about Mormonism really, but like a little bit, like we teased a little bit because she would like drink. I even feel weird saying it, but she would like drink coffee, right? But it's like, oh, but Mormons aren't supposed to do that, and and her Mormon church, we don't want her to know. Her Mormon church, we wouldn't want them to find out that she drinks coffee, stuff like that, because it's caffeine as a big thing. So I was like, oh, not. It's like, oh, you got a tattoo for her mom died, so you got a tattoo, and you're drinking coffee. It's like, all right. I didn't read that in the Book of Mormon or something like, like, and that's like kind of funny because like this is more important to her than that. But I think it might have been the concept of deception more, like the lying part of being lied
Oh
to
yeah.
might have been more the angle. But again, I don't need to I can reanalyze some of this in my own time as well. Like, but this is the kind of stuff I think about. Like I try to think about
Right. Well, I think it's important
this
for
is what people do. That's all.
there's going to be a lot of different people can look at that situation because it's layered and complicated, and we wouldn't have the sensory data you have obviously from being there, but people would come to different conclusions, and that's how you know it's a tricky situation. That's really all I'm trying to
Hmm.
kind of show there is that we don't kind of obsess over situations that were like you had two choices and you picked the wrong one. It's where you're like, I don't know where I went wrong because there's so many parts. You get what I'm saying? And it is still
Yes.
important to that central piece of who you are. And we are predictive beings, right? That is what the FEP and active inference says. And I believe that these ther- thero- thermodynamic and biological intersection areas where math meets life are where a lot of our deepest understandings of what it is to be a human is kind of coming from. And that's one of the reasons why we explore it here.
which is it's fun because I don't a lot of people don't is well I should let's not speak for people, let's speak for myself. I don't think about what I think a lot of time. Even I spend time with myself. I try to think about how I feel and how I'm processing because I don't want to secretly be unhappy with life and not be unaware of it. And I'm not. There's no danger of that. But I like to check up about how I feel about things. But like I don't think about why I think what I think all the time. And so this is kind of a good spot to think about on the second level of why a thought instead of what the thought is, I suppose.
And I spend way too much time thinking about why I think what I think or how, etc. But it's very important to me in the work I do because like part of my identity, right, would be being a philosopher or being a poet or being a thinker, right? Like these are the kind of like things. So like I like the idea that I'm a deep person, right? And if something were to threaten that identity, I would struggle with it. You know what I mean? If somebody would be like, "Oh, actually, I really thought that was obvious the whole time. Like, you took years thinking about that." I'd be like, "Wow, that person has a level of depth that, far surpasses me." I wouldn't make the assumption that I'm lesser, right? I would make the assumption that they're greater. But it's the same thing, right? Making me lesser or making them greater. It's the same mechanic.
100%. And like I tend to be a like I think you've identified, I'm more of a vibe thinker, you know. I kind of go with like how do I feel about this without like I don't not without knowing data or research. Like what do I think about how does this make me feel and how do what do I think that means? And I think that's kind of cool because that does match up pretty well with like your way more researched and understanding of the fundamentals underneath. Hopefully I could vibe my way. You know, maybe I'm that child. You know, I'm the childlike thinker. I'm like I mean I don't know, but it's like maybe it's because of this, and you're like hopefully I'll be able to give you like you said, most of the ideas are dumb, but maybe a couple transcendent ones will come out of here. One thing about my ego that this is not necessarily directly connected, but it's something I just thought of is I don't know someone with a big ego that is wants to be perceived as successful or whatever. I don't know what the opposite of that is, but that's almost what I am. Like I'm a custodian and I make whatever X amount of dollars per hour, but I really want people to think of me as a lowly janitor, a poor, lonely janitor. Or maybe it's like, I've got my girlfriend, but it's like he doesn't make much money. He just has like a bottom of the barrel entry level job. He doesn't have much going on, and I like it when people think of me in that way. I don't know why, but it's like I want people to pay me no mind, really. Like
Mhm.
fundamentally, I don't want people to even think about me.
Yes.
Besides the people I care about. But if they're like if someone like tries to talk to me like, hey, we see what you do, janitor, we appreciate you. I'm just like, leave me the fuck alone. I'm being paid. It's not volunteer work. I don't say that. I'm like, hey, no problem. You know, and I is like, let me know if you need anything, I'll help you out. But I have the opposite of what I want to be perceived as small, as like insignificant in the eyes of other people.
Yes, and both of those are predictive strategies for different outcomes, right? One is I'm looking for more opportunity, people to think I'm better, so I can climb some sort of ladder, which usually leads to some sort of position where you don't actually have to know anything, right? Like middle managers, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like actually you're just relaying information, but with authority. Um, uh, and that also could be driven by like narcissism or whatever, that kind of stuff. What you're talking about is something that is actually just as common, if not more common, but because of the fact that it's undersold, right? It's not talked about. So,
Hmm.
what does that strategy maximize for? It maximizes for going under the radar, which really, if people don't understand why you would want to go under the radar, just think of all the times people ask you for things, all the times people bother you, all the times that you have to use extra effort on things. Going under the radar has a ton of benefits, and also um, it's safer. I guess that's the best way to say it, right? Is people who are not thought about are not the first victims of anything because they're not being thought about, etc. And people thinking you have something means that they might want to try to take that from you, and that could be a danger. So, like, there definitely is a benefit to thinking like that. Um, I'm not sure if that's why
I,
you think like that, but I'm just trying to think
well,
of strategies of why that might work.
It sounds like it aligns with I had a promotion and I was the chief custodian, which is like the head. Basically, it's like my school. It's like the principal is in charge of the staff and students, and I'm in charge of the building and the maintenance, right? So it's like the building is my building, and the people are the principal's people. And I basically quit that job after 3 months because it's like everyone's always asking me for shit and about shit, and just like Cameron, this student's shoelace is untied. Can you bring the, it's not, it was not the work. I don't care about working hard at all, but I hated everyone looking for me all the time, trying to ask me for this and for that. Like, because I'm an authority on this and that. And I'm like, I so much prefer being a night janitor where no one even knew I existed at all. So I stepped down from that position into where I'm currently at, which is like a middle ground, but it's 90% the night janitor, but with the pay of the other one. It's like it's the win-win. It's literally I make maybe 50 cents less an hour, maybe a dollar less an hour. Um, but it might be even identical. It's very close. But it's like I'm almost just a night custodian. Um, and it's like it's the best job I've had in my life. I don't need to see that many people, maybe sometimes, but so I think that aligns basically pretty well, right? Like the job where I was the authority, I hate it. I One thing I've learned about myself, and I've tried to do it time and time again, because you want to make more money, you want to provide for your family, it means you take on more responsibility most of the time, which means you become in charge of stuff. I hate telling other people what to do. Fundamentally, at my core, I don't want to be anyone's boss for anything. And I think that this is what is like this I think that clashes with my core my whatever my core ego identity of like freedom, right? People are free to make bad decisions.
I'm so
I
mad that you said that because I was just
Yeah.
waiting for you to stop talking so I could do a throwback to the last episode where I said, what is one of the core pieces of your identity that you talked about last episode? Freedom, right? And I think that plays
Yeah.
in perfectly, like you're saying.
I think it's because a lot of people believe in freedom and want people to have freedom, but like I have such a disdain. Not a, and I like being told what to do. I like my bosses telling me what to do, or they're like, "Hey, we need to get this done today." I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. I'll take care of it." It's maybe slightly above my job position, but like whatever, or maybe it's like more than I'm necessarily supposed to do. But I like making their job easier. We're a team here. That kind of stuff doesn't bother me at all. But to do the opposite, I'll just do it all myself. I hate trying to tell other people what to do, trying to punish other people. It's like every time I put myself in a job where I do that, I fail at that part of the job every single time with consistently. And I'm like, I'll work on it. I can be better at it. And I honestly don't think I think it's too much of an antithesis of who I am to ever actually do that well. I might be able to get by, but I'll never excel at being able to tell other people what to do.
Yeah,
Um,
and forget the getting by thing, right? You're gonna pay
mhm,
such an internal cost because when your narrative identity and your real identity don't line up, it's actually like when they line up, things are super efficient, right? Because it's like a streamline of I could just be myself, right? There is a freedom in being yourself that if anybody hasn't experienced that or you haven't figured out like what your core identity is, like figure that out first, all right, before you decide what job you're gonna do, before any of those things, because it is so freeing. It is like I have purposely worked for my dream job, I did all the things the hard way and climb my way up to find out that I got a job that I didn't even want, right? Because it clashed
mhm.
with who I am internally as a person and I couldn't be who I want to be internally as a person while having those set of responsibilities that were going to force me to do things against my core values. And anyway, my point is that it's extremely it uses a lot of resources and energy in your brain. And there's only so much resources you have when it comes to like thinking and maintaining your emotion and your disposition with people you love and your job, etc. You don't want to waste that capacity. And I think making that choice to step down is not only like the right thing to do, I think it is like the brave thing to do because people too often make this assumption that because culture says you need to continue to try to climb the ladder and do whatever, that is where satisfaction or happiness is going to be. But people are widely different, and most people aren't going to line up with that reality.
Sorry, we're having some technical issues. I wanted to just wait to see if it's me.
Oh, I hear
All
you.
right. Okay, there we go. We're back.
Well, I went on a monologue, but
I heard most of it. Let
okay.
me just say where it cut off was you were calling me brave. All right.
That's right. So yeah, I think that most people, because of the way society tries to um, say that winning is climbing and improving and taking on more, that undermines the fact that people have to understand who they are, what their capacity is, and protect your capacity because your happiness exists within your capacity to be yourself.
This is where I think also knowing yourself is so much more important. Like if because if I listen to others, it like first because like I would talk about like I'm not sure if this is for me. I don't know if I really want to do it, but I'm going to give it a couple months. I'm going to give it 6 months. I ended up only giving it 3 months or something like that. Um, but like people are like, no, 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 Cameron, don't quit. Stick it out. Trust me, it gets better. It gets better. Or people then I do quit, and people are like, what happened? Like, why did you quit? You know, like there's I'm not saying I got a huge amount of judgment, but there's clearly people that were like oh I guess he just like even like the lady when I because I went in, I had to apply for the position, and like 3 months later, I went in and I applied. And the fact that I consider this even a small slight, even though I think she was trying to be mostly cordial, um, was like she's like, oh, sick of it already, huh? Like that was her line, sick of it already, huh? And I was like, I didn't take like strong offense, but I still remember her saying that. So the point where I was like, why do you care? Like it's kind of what I thought, you know, it's like, but if I listen to that, like the judgment and the stuff, like I've literally had the best job I've ever had in my life right now. I'm so much happier than I was. And I remember because I worked at Ivers as the assistant manager for and like it what are the stakes at Ivers really high? No, but it was like but it could feel very high still. Like restaurants are stressful, but like I was very unhappy for like a year straight. Like all the time pretty much. And it wasn't working hard. I didn't mind working hard, but it was just like it was the responsibility of it was like it was too different from who I am as a person. And the price I was paying, it I will say I wish I had a different curse because the easiest way to make money is to have authority over other people. Like companies will pay you to have authority over people. So I think this might be part of the reason why I have decided to do the content creation. I like video games, but a lot of people like video games, want to do content creation, don't do it for 10 years and 11 years and put in effort all the time. But this is where I'm my own boss. I only need to tell myself what to do. I don't hire people for thumbnails or to edit my videos. I don't like telling anybody what to do on anything. Even like I commissioned art. They're like, "What do you want?" I'm like, "Man, whatever you think is good." You know, I want the artist to be proud of the work that you make. So just make what you think would be good. This is the kind of what the theme of the like everything about my life is about not wanting to have authority over other people. So if you learn yourself and you understand yourself and you could find out those core values, you even after you know that about yourself and you discover that about yourself, I feel like you'll be in denial about it and try to work through it for a long time until you could really fundamentally accept that about yourself. Um, and for me, like because I kept taking jobs that I have authority because of course that's how you make more money, and I want to make more money because I want to buy a house. But I finally found a position that I can make the most. I'm making more money than I've ever made, and I have very little authority, enough where I could put up with it because it's not. As most days I don't. So yeah, that is kind of something that is very helpful to figure out about yourself when you can.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought us there because there's not enough places on the internet or in the world where people tell you to trust yourself instead of other people, right? Because here's the reality. Most of the time, you're going to be wrong about 99% of things in life. You should listen to the majority. When it comes to things internally about yourself, is the 1% of the time where you're going to have a better idea than other people. Now, they can tell you structurally what's the best idea for success, but they can't tell you whether you'll be happy in it, whether it will cost you more than what you make. And here's the other part that I think happens a lot. This happened with my parents personally, because I've always been, um, I don't even know what to call it. Someone who was convinced, however they wanted to live life, they were going to be able to make it happen. And I had all of these morals and stuff where my parents are like, no one can live like that. Like you're never, what job are you going to have where you're not polluting the rainforest or doing something, you know what I mean? And I was like, I'm gonna find something, all right, because I'm not gonna make the world a worse place. And they're like, you're moralizing, you'll grow up and you'll get over it someday because you have, you'll have a family or whatever. And I decided to go into, social services, nonprofit sector, right? And then now I work in the data within the nonprofit sector. But the whole time, everybody always told me that you're not going to find a job where you don't have authority over other people, where you don't do negative things that break you know the morals that I happen to have, which are a little bit more complex than even like you can probably get away with most of the modern Christian like baseline Ten Commandments stuff, but like when it comes to deeper ideas where it's like, is it okay for me to manipulate somebody into buying something? Most people are going to say, yeah, that's fine. That's advertising. You know what I mean? For me personally, I can't be any part of that, right? So I can't be a salesman, anything like that. But anyway, the point is, I also like Cameron, and am in a position where I now make more than I've ever made. Doing something that internally makes me feel fulfilled, that lines up with my personal work, with my philosophy work, and I'm more happy than I've ever been because of that. Even though I spent at least 8 years going in a direction that was still within nonprofit, but more aligned with what my parents told me to do, right? Like I needed to be a director. I became a director. I found out that I am really bad at doing things that people tell me that breaks my morals. And you probably are like, well, you shouldn't have a job like that, right? But it's like the problem is I did have a job like that, right? Because we were owned by a corporate entity. The corporate entity wanted profit. We're a subcontracted nonprofit, and I was telling them no. So I was eventually going to get fired no matter what.
Yeah. I think my cat's gonna throw up. But we'll finish this conversation first. It's funny that you mentioned that because I got my loan officer's license. I was working in a mortgage company. I was their front desk person, and I was eventually going to move into a processor. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to get my loan officer's license. So it's what my dad does, and I think I could probably do it. I don't know how the hell I'm going to do it, but I know they make a lot of money. And then I just remember like getting my loan officer's license and kind of thinking about the job more. Like after I got my license, everyone was very proud of me. Good job. You're doing, I didn't even tell anybody I was getting it, and then I suddenly had it, and it was like a big thing. Cameron, you could be our newest loan officer. And I remember just like sitting through as the front desk person, sitting through all these loans, and I'm like, I cannot sell people these homes that I would not buy. Like I would not sell them these loans that I would not buy. I would just have to tell them you can't do this. This is the worst financial decision of your life. You've lived in this house for 60 years and you have a 30-year mortgage on it. Like it's been your residence for 60 years. You refinance it I was like, I just like I can't sell people. I don't want to sell people. I want to actively unsell people. I need people breaking down my door. And like when I kind of express this to other people, not to this extreme where I was like, because I actually want to talk people out of stuff. I want to talk people out of doing stuff that I think they shouldn't do, not talk people into stuff. Uh, but a lot of loan officers I talked to, because I had a bunch of them that were like kind of semi friends, but mostly coworkers. But they're like, we're not financial advisors. We're a tool, right? We're like a calculator. People can use us as a tool to get what they want. Whether or not it's good or bad for them is not our job. Our job is to make it possible and let them know what is possible to let them make that decisions. And I'm like, I guess, but like I just and I don't even think it's necessarily I don't know if it's that I cared about the people that much, but it's like I think it was deeper than me caring about any individual person that was on the loan, and more being like I don't want to convince someone to do anything in the first place. I don't like manipulating people. That's why even my Raid Shadow Legends ad is like, do you hate Raid Shadow Legends? Good, download it because we get to take their money and we don't even need to play the game, right? That's like my Raid Shadow Legends ad that I did. So, and again, I've maybe compromised on some of those morals a little bit for money, like on the Raid Shadow Legends stuff, because like I don't want to play that game, but I don't think necessarily because it's not as deep as that. It's not as deep as like I don't want to promote something I wouldn't use. It's more like I don't want to manipulate people, like over the top, just manipulate someone into doing
Yes.
something that would benefit me. Um, but yeah,
And
yeah, the loan officer stuff. I never even took the job officially because I just like I can't do this job. I could not. I wouldn't be able to do it.
yes, and I've had 3 months where I didn't work for a nonprofit, and that was to go work for a big insurance firm. And like I broke the record for fastest to get my insurance license, right? I started doing the processing, and I I had to what do you call it? I had to total an 83-year-old woman's vehicle that she had had for like 15 years. She's gonna die. This was her last vehicle, and
Yeah.
she had to go out and get a brand new vehicle for the last however many years of her life because I totaled her car because that was our policy. I couldn't not total it without breaking the policy. Blah blah. And I resigned the next day. I was like, nope, I can't do this. This just hurts me interior my inside. And I think there's two reasons. It's not necessarily because I'm a better person than anybody else, not at all. It
Hmm.
is because when I think about what I'm doing or what other people are doing, the lens that I look at it with is, if everyone did this, how would the world look? And if it looks substantially worse, then I just can't do that because why should I do something different than what everyone else is going to do, right? So as soon as you start selling everybody subprime mortgages and stuff, right? Then you have a 2008 housing collapse. That's historically what
Hmm.
happened. You know what I mean? So there are real problems with some of these things, but they unfortunately can be managed if they just don't get too big, right? It's still a problem, but as soon as you break a threshold, something horrible happens.
Yeah, I'm kind of I don't know if I'm 50-50 on that, but I could think of examples of where I am for that and other examples where I go against that. Where a perfect example for, like, I always put my shopping cart away at the grocery store. Always. If I don't see someone to put, I'll take other shopping carts that are out in the parking lot and I'll put them away, because like this is just like a society and everyone should just do their little part to and keep everything, like I don't like the arguments like, well, they got people paid to come pick them up. It's like, well, they wouldn't have to pay that person to pick them up if everyone just put them away. They could have them doing inside, doing something that matters, making the store look nicer, right? So like I just like, if everyone just left all their shopping carts everywhere, like it would. That's a small example, but that's something that is, like, I think a quintessential. It takes almost no effort, no most almost no inconvenience, and it does have a little bit of an impact. And on the other hand, I don't vote. And I don't think no one should vote, but I'm like, I don't care. I don't need to vote. I'm in a blue state, right? So it's like, that's an example of something I don't live as if I think everyone should, because I don't really want to vote. But I'm also not super left or right. I don't know who I would vote for, honestly. I think if I really did know who I'd want to vote for, I probably would. But I'm sure I could think of other examples of, yeah, I know not everyone can do this, but it's not a big deal if I do this. 90, maybe it's like 90% of the time I don't live that way, but there are the exceptions. But for the most part, I'm like, listen, if everyone threw their trash on the side of the street, the whole world would be shit, right? The whole country would be shit. So why, I'm not going to throw my trash on the street, even if I could get away with this,
Yeah.
because I'm not special, right? I'm just another person. I'm not the protagonist, right? I'm part of a giant ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when you do have that like, I don't even know what to call it, but like um systematic thinking, like I'm just part of an ecosystem, right? So it's like me and all the other nodes or cells in the network have the same responsibility, right? No more, no
Mhm.
less. And so it's like that's how I try to hold myself. So I don't that's how I avoid the trap of being morally superior, which I struggled with more in my youth because I was like, why is everybody else a piece of shit? And it's like, oh no, you're just very blind to your individual kind of ways of being a piece of shit. Because you decide the things you value, right? So as soon
Mhm.
as there's something that you do that you probably shouldn't, you say, well, that doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? But if you instead think, distributed network, what's everybody's role in making things better? That generally seems to work. And there is a hierarchy of like logical order when you think of why you're going to make decisions, right? So for example, in your voting one, right, you might not be an educated voter, and you might believe that voting is something that people should do while understanding the facts and the topics. And if that's something you believe, that could be a higher belief than the does it work if everybody doesn't do it. You get what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, like I could probably be pretty convinced, without having thought about it deeply at all, without having any science behind it. I am probably in a camp where if they were like, "Hey, only the top 50% of IQs can vote," I'd be like, "All right, that's probably fair." Maybe I'd find a way to not make it a male versus female things. I know when you get skewed to the super super high percent, it tends to not be even. But like, whatever. The idea is like, is there a litmus test for voting? Is it versus a human right? I wouldn't be opposed to. I could be convinced. I think baseline, I think society would be better if we let the best of the best vote versus everybody vote, which is kind of weird because I think that's not necessarily the most American thing. But I could also be convinced that that's just bad and it leads to elitism and it makes big cities whatever think they know farming better than they do. I could be convinced the other way, but I think baseline, without having thought about it too much, that maybe that's why it's I don't vote and I don't think as strongly about that aspect of myself because I'm like, yeah, I could understand if not everyone had to vote. You know, if
Yeah,
not everyone was allowed to vote,
yeah,
and it wasn't based off and it wasn't based on like race or gender, things like that.
there's a lot going on there. Like, um, I agree that there could possibly be a method to figure out who would be like better for voting or not. The problem is any method I can think of has like super dangerous like downstream effects. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like any system you make would just immediately turn into like an oppressive system. And
Yeah, that's why
yeah.
I don't. I'm like, all right, top 20% of male and female IQs can all vote, and then everyone else can't. I'm like, does that work out? Probably not for something. I'm sure there's like, uh, this is where it's like I don't like the government in general. I'm not anti-government, but I feel like they don't. I like to say they don't do a great job, but realistically, we're still getting by. The fact I don't think all of the politicians should also be lawyers. I don't necessarily think that's like the most diverse. Um, I think diversity of expertise could probably be more useful than just purely being good at arguing. Um, but at the same time, like it's working, but I don't think it doesn't feel like it's it's really thriving at this point anymore. It feels like
Yeah.
it's limping
Well,
further and
let's
further
just
along.
also agree that like we've seen that the masses can have really bad ideas, right? So just
Yes.
raw populist voting is dangerous, right? Having a select class, no matter how you divvy it up, they will find a way to game any system, right? Especially if you pick smart people. And the funny thing is, right now, the system that we've had for a long time, right, where you vote for somebody and they get to vote for who's president, right? That's how
Yeah.
it works currently. You know what I mean? So it's like they don't even have to listen to the popular vote. They tend to a remarkable percentage of the time. Why? Because they want to get reelected next time. But they don't have to, right? There's a handful of times that people have gone against the grain there. But the electoral college really is how we tried to solve that issue of, well, we can't have every person actually vote because the average person's kind of an idiot. I'm not sure exactly what their reasoning was, but that kind of sounds like it. And so you guys can elect one person who represents your area or whatever, and that they can vote for
It
president.
it I'm kind of torn on the electoral college. I don't want to get into politics, and I think we got to wrap it up pretty soon. But just to say is like this is where a good example of why I think people would say I'm wishy washy, or maybe I'm a little too open minded. But if someone says the one man one vote makes the most logical sense at a baseline, everyone should be, just because you live in Iowa doesn't mean your vote should be worth more than someone that lives in New York, right? um or whatever. And like I understand that. Why would other people's votes be more than other people's votes? Like inherently as an equality thing, that doesn't make sense to me. But when you think about the electoral college, it's like the idea of, let's say the 51% don't get to dictate to the 49% everything that happens, right? The truth is, there's more people living in major cities and they don't fundamentally understand rural areas as much as the people that live there. And so you don't want people that don't understand your community and your whatever. Like you don't want a bunch of people in New York making a bunch of rules about how much cows you can have on a farm or something, right? Something that they just know no shit about, right? So like I also understand that people that are very important to the culture and society need to be able to have a say equivalent to their impact necessarily, on this kind of stuff. So it's like I'm just like I don't know, I fucking agree with both, all right? I understand both make sense to me. And that's how I feel about 90% of stupid issues most of the time, right? Just people, they both sound reasonable and I don't know which one is more right. So when both things are makes sense to me and neither one seems super more right, I tend to like, let's just keep doing what we're doing then. Let's not accidentally break it just to test it out. Whereas things like healthcare, I feel like healthcare should be, I am a fan of like healthcare for all basically, right? I don't think it's a human right because a human provides it, but I think it should be an American right, right of an American, I guess. Um, and like such a wealthy country. maybe the math doesn't work out. I don't know, but like that's something I would like. All right, let's try it because I think this is a fundamental good in the right direction. Whereas like the electoral college, I'm like I just don't have a strong moral compass about that one. You know.
Yeah. And I think what you did is you showed how to hold contradictory ideas, right, without collapsing. And that doesn't mean that you can't make a decision. Like you said, in a situation like that where they both seem reasonable, you just say, you know what, I think we keep doing what we've been doing because we know that works. And most of the time when you change something, it makes it worse, right? It's like, have you ever changed something in a recipe? It's like, sure, maybe you had that time that you put cinnamon in and it just kicked, but most of the time it's going to make it worse. So
And
you can,
you'll never see the unforeseen side effects. That's why they're unforeseen, right? And there's always unforeseen side effects of some kind, right? And it may not be immediately apparent, but we already know what the side effects of our current system are. Like they're pretty much all known, and so we're kind of equipped to deal with those. That's but again, like I am for change, and I could even be for radical change if it's something that I think is really a good direction for society. I'm not against that kind of stuff. I'm not against like the health breaking the healthcare system to potentially make something way better, even if it's not an overnight thing, and even if it's temporarily worse to get to a direction that I think is better for society. But for something like this, where I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's like let's just keep it going because it's working, and is it really worth the risk of like electing a dictator or something, right? Like electing some total sociopath because he had a really good YouTube video, right? I don't know. Like at least the electoral college is preventing, the 51 from telling the 49. There's good side, there's good things about it. I just don't like it when people pretend the other side is all bad and our side is all good. Obviously,
yes.
there's good and bad. You're just valuing the good and bads differently.
Exactly. Yeah. And understanding and valuing trade-offs is I think what you did a good job. I don't even think you had to caveat it, but you did. And I don't yeah, I don't think people would have saw that and said, "Oh, he doesn't believe in change." I think the healthcare example is perfect for like when things are obviously not even, right? We look at both of the situations, we see the good and the bad of both, but when the bad really overweighs the good on the other side, that's when we decide to make change, right? So we don't burn everything down just because it's not perfect, but we also stay open to change when it's obviously devastating.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about healthcare, but I will say the poor and the rich get a pretty good deal because they can afford it or don't need to pay for it. It's everyone that's in the 90% in the middle that have to go bankrupt every time they get a runny nose. They don't go to the doctor because like, well, I don't want to spend $300 to my doctor to be like, no, you're fine. Just go ahead and, take some more vitamin C and you'll be fine. And that's a $300 bill. It's like, fuck, bro, what? I'll just not go. And then something seriously does go wrong and you don't go and you don't care. Yeah, I could go on healthcare. That's one of the out of everything in the country that should not be a for profit. I think like healthcare is like the one.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm not even for free college. A lot of people put those hand in hand. I don't necessarily think education should be free. I'm more iffy on it at least because I don't think people that don't want to go to college necessarily should have to pay more taxes for people that do want to go to college. I don't. It does incentivize you to be a winner, but I don't know if someone that didn't go to college, I'm like, I don't want to pay more taxes for a bunch of people that go study useless shit.
You made the
Like
right
a lot
choice,
of
all
people.
right? College
Yeah,
is a scam, all right? With AI education like coming out the way that it is, like colleges are going to be done for in 20 years. It's a waste of money. But yeah, I'm with you. Like my three big topics where it's like these things just should not be privatized and monetized, whatever, is healthcare, insurance, and why am I blanking on the last one? Oh, pharmaceuticals.
prisons. Oh, I was thinking prisons because I
I'm
don't like
I'm
I don't think you
also
can have
not
prisons
okay
for
with
profit.
privatized prisons either. But there's probably a lot more than three. I was just gonna list three.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But all right, thank you so much for everyone who came to watch. And